To live in ancient times, the soft grass, the wind in one's hair, picking your own berries, for harvesting your own food, and just living day by day without the struggles of modern day life. However, life is never as glamorous, so let's talk about the next best thing. Hi, I'm Bear, and welcome to the Starly Cheese Guild, where we'll be talking about hunting and gathering communities. We see the lifestyle of hunter-gatherers were based on the reliance of hunting for animals and foraging food. We see that this was essential for survival, and it not only forced you to have a strong communal bond, but it allowed them to split up tasks depending on someone's capabilities and skill set. We see one example of dividing people into their skill set is in the Paleolithic era, where women were usually women were usually assigned to do long-distance hunting. Hunter-gatherer communities persisted until about 12,000 years ago, where agriculture made people shift into alternate lifestyles. However, there's some places around the globe that still do this community practice. We see that hunter-gatherer communities were nomadic. This means that they traveled from place to place, and they would typically move to places where vegetation and wildlife flourished. We see that this was within 7 to 500 square miles of the area that they were currently living in. We also see that this was because seasonal requirements changed the type of food that they could get. This made it impractical for long-term settlements. While people usually just paint a picture of the hunters chasing down their prey, we see that they had various strategies depending on their local conditions. This could range from trapping their fish or trapping their prey to actually hunting down their animals on foot. It also ranged from stalking their animals and even gathering the remains that another predator left behind. We see that hunting was not only used for food, but for things like clothing and tools that were made with their hooves and their claws. When talking about hunting-gathering communities, we see that there are two types, those being simple and complex forager lifestyles. A simple forager lifestyle would depend on a hunter or gathering resources from the most immediate natural environment. This also meant that they were semi-nomadic and they lived in very small communities. They also had a very deep connection with the environment that allowed them to kind of know how animals could react, know which plants were edible, and know how and where to find water. We see that the way they eat allowed them to have a very low impact on the environment. We see that complex forager lifestyle was more focused on being sedimentary. They had larger communities and even villages. We see that their lifestyle also reflected in their food. They had a very diverse set of food preferences due to the fact that they were sedimentary. They also had various complex tools, such as fishing nets and even hooks. We see their society was also more complex. They appointed leaders, and they even had things such as festivals or even feasts dedicated to foraging and hunting. Another difference is that they put an emphasis on calendars. This was because hunter and gatherer communities placed an emphasis on a connection to the stars and the earth. When we looked at shared principles, we see some such as egalitarianism, the concept of punishment, and morals. Egalitarianism was essentially the fact that everyone could contribute to the society. We see that decisions were made collectively and not as individuals. While in media, we see that men looked like they were exclusively the hunters and women looked like they were exclusively the gatherers, we see that there was an intermix. We see that 50% of big game were often caught by women, and women would even go on hunting trips with their friends or their family members. So it was very a fluid and mixed environment. Another shared principle was the principle of punishment. We see that there was no jail in ancient times, so they would usually handle all their accounts out in the public. And the worst punishment one could get was being ostracized, and this was basically because one could not live very long by themselves outside. However, we see that family members would usually try to help their family member that was ostracized, and it rarely lasted more than a few days. One difference in morals is we see that simple foragers placed an emphasis on eating natural and whole grain foods and eating foods in their natural state. This means limited roasting, cooking, and sometimes just eating food raw. This placed an emphasis on sustainability and a connection to the environment. They also had an emphasis on hunting only what you need and not what you want. It kind of makes me think about that one scene in Mufasa where Mufasa's giving the speech to his son. That. Let's just have it play.
Everything you see exists together in a delicate balance. As king,
You see? Yeah, that's was basically the principle. Complex forages, on the other hand, consumed a large range of food, including things like fruits, nuts, roots, um, fish, seeds, insects sometimes, and this would allow them, or this would cause them to have traditional ways to store their food, as well as traditional methods for healing. This put an emphasis on intergenerational knowledge transfer, which is so much to say. But this is essentially where knowledge about food preservation or even knowledge about healing cuts or bruises are transferred orally. And this allowed for their sustainability of life to continue and for them to thrive as a community, which is this is actually the way how we know so much about them today. Hey, this was Bear, and thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please comment below what you liked or something new that you learned, and stay curious.